Welcome to the deep dive. I'm so glad you're joining us today because we are stepping into just a massive cultural time machine.
Oh, absolutely.
If you grew up anywhere near the late 90s or early 2000s, you know the aesthetic. I mean, the spiky, gravity-defying hair, the massive, clunky dual discs strapped to kids' arms on the playground. We're talking about Yu-Gi-Oh!
It really is a fascinating cultural artifact. It sits right alongside Pokemon in that pantheon of massive global anime and trading card phenomenons.
But that's the thing, right? People lump it in with Pokemon. They think of it as this bright, colorful Saturday morning cartoon about the heart of the cards and believing in friendship.
All right.
But we've brought in a massive stack of materials today. Encyclopedias, character breakdowns, creator notes, and the reality of Kazuki Takahashi's original story is wildly different. It is dark. It is psychological. Honestly, in its earliest chapters, it's basically a horror manga.
A lot of that misconception comes from how the property was introduced to the West. The trading card game, the TCG, became the commercial engine.
Yeah, it completely took over.
Exactly. It eclipsed the source narrative entirely. When you look at the early chapters before the cards even existed, the series is actually an intense exploration of human morality. It's about karma, the lasting impact of severe trauma, and what happens when people are forced to confront the absolute darkest parts of their own cytology.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer density of what we're looking at is just staggering.
It really is.
Our mission today isn't to just read down a wiki page of trading card rules. We are looking at a narrative that weaves together 3,000-year-old blood magic, modern high-stakes corporate espionage, and intense tabletop role-playing games into a single cohesive thread.
What's fascinating here is that the framework of the game in Takahashi's universe is never really about winning a trophy.
No, not at all.
A game is a supernatural crucible. It's a method of dragging a person's absolute worst impulses out into the light and punishing them for it.
And I want to promise you, the listener, right now, whether you are a hardcore competitive tournament player who knows every card interaction, or someone who vaguely remembers the theme song from 20 years ago, you're going to leave this deep dive with a completely different perspective on this universe. The story of how this franchise was localized, censored, and stripped of its darkest elements to sell cardboard to children is incredible.
We should probably start with the original premise, the foundation before the global card empire even existed.
Right. We have to talk about Yugi Mutou, the protagonist.
Yeah.
In the very early chapters, we meet Yugi as this incredibly shy, timid high school student.
He's very isolated.
Yeah, he loves puzzles, he loves board games, but he is completely incapable of standing up for himself. He gets bullied relentlessly. And he lives with his grandfather, Sugoroku, who runs a local game shop and is basically this retired globe-trotting gaming master.
Right.
His grandfather gives Yugi this ancient, unsolved Egyptian artifact called the Millennium Puzzle,
Which serves as the catalyst for everything. The puzzle isn't just a tough Rubik's Cube, it's a soul vessel.
Yugi spends years trying to solve it. When he finally snaps the last golden piece into place, his body becomes the host to a second spirit, a spirit known as Dark Yugi or Yami Yugi. But Dark Yugi isn't pulling out a deck of monsters.
He's not playing Duel Monsters at all.
Not a single card.
In the original Japanese text, the primary conflict resolution mechanism is something called the Yami no Gomu, which translates directly to the dark games or shadow games.
And these are terrifying. Dark Yugi basically acts as this ruthless supernatural vigilante.
Yes.
When he encounters someone abusing their power, a bully, a corrupt teacher, a criminal, he challenges them to a shadow game.
The rules of these games are absolute. They operate on a strict karmic philosophy. The stakes aren't points on a scoreboard. The stakes are the player's minds.
Oh.
Dark Yugi creates a scenario that tests the opponent's morality. If they play fair, they survive. But they never play fair. Their own vice, their greed, or vanity compels them to cheat.
And when they cheat, the trap springs. Dark Yugi subjects them to a penalty game. It's basically a customized psychological torture sequence.
You can clearly see the influence of Dante's Inferno here. The punishment is always ironically tailored to the specific sin of the transgressor.
Let's get into some specific examples because they are genuinely disturbing.
They really are.
The first major antagonist Yugi faces is a guy named Ushio. He's a massive, intimidating hall monitor at Yugi's high school. Ushio beats up the kids who were bullying Yugi, but then he turns around and extorts Yugi. He demands a fee of 20,000 yen for his so-called protection services.
Ushio represents pure greed and the abuse of authority. He uses his physical size to intimidate and extract wealth.
Yugi obviously doesn't have 20,000 yen, and Ushio starts getting violent. So Dark Yugi takes over.
The first appearance of the Shadow Game.
Exactly. He challenges Ushio to a game where they literally climb a dome and draw cards to move forward, with the loser falling. Ushio, driven by greed, tries to cheat and attack Yugi directly. He loses. Dark Yugi hits him with a penalty game.
The way his mind breaks is highly specific.
He is driven entirely insane. The hallucination Ushio experiences makes him see dead leaves and garbage on the street as piles of money. He's left rolling around in a pile of literal trash, laughing maniacally, completely out of his mind, clutching dead leaves.
That's the karmic echo. He valued money over human empathy, so his punishment traps him in a delusion of wealth that is actually filth. It's a complete psychological collapse.
And it doesn't stop with high school bullies. There is a teacher, Miss Chono. The students call her the Expelling Witch.
A very fitting title.
Right. She takes sadistic pleasure in finding minor infractions to expel students she doesn't like. And she's hyper vain. She wears this incredibly thick, cakey makeup to hide what she considers her ugly face.
She's a hypocrite. She polices the behavior and appearance of her students while hiding behind a literal and metaphorical mask.
Dark Yugi forces her into a shadow game involving a mirror and puzzle pieces. When she inevitably cheats to try and win, her penalty game triggers. Her makeup literally cracks.
Like glass.
Yes. It peels and falls off her face in front of her entire class, like physical jigsaw puzzle pieces, revealing her true face beneath.
The facade crumbles. The children she tormented are the ones who witness her exposure. It's poetic justice, but it's brutal.
Oh, it gets way worse. There's a guy named Suzoji, a terrible karaoke singer, who physically assaults people to force them to listen to his ear-splitting music. His penalty game forces him to hear his own heartbeat amplified to a deafening, torturous volume.
The auditory torture fits the crime.
Exactly. And there's a gym teacher, Mr. Kurita, who aggressively holds a student down and shaves his long hair against his will. Dark Yugi traps his actual soul inside a miniature game piece.
It's important to recognize the sociocultural context Takahashi was writing in during the 90s. The Japanese education system was dealing with intense discussions around severe bullying, known as EGM, and the rigid, sometimes abusive authority of school officials.
That makes so much sense.
Dark Yugi acts as the ultimate fantasy of retribution for powerless youth. He is a judge, jury, and executioner wrapped in the guise of a teenage boy.
You even have an escaped convict. Prisoner number 777. He takes Téa, one of Yugi's friends, hostage in a diner. Dark Yugi challenges him to a game involving serving a drink with one finger resting on a lighter. High stakes right from the start. The convict cheats, and Dark Yugi traps him in an illusion where he believes he has been set on fire. He is just screaming and rolling on the floor of this diner.
Which brings up an unavoidable question. If this property started as a grim, psychological horror manga where convicts are immolated and teenagers are driven insane, how did it become a sanitized Saturday morning cartoon in America?
That is the perfect pivot.
Yeah.
The localization of this show is a legendary piece of media history. The company responsible for bringing the anime to Western television was 4Kids Entertainment, and they had a massive problem on their hands.
They were targeting a young demographic in the United States, and the broadcasting standards and practices for children's television in the U.S. are vastly different from those in Japan.
Extremely different.
You cannot have a show aimed at 8 to 12-year-olds, where characters are threatened with execution, torture, or dismemberment. The original Japanese anime, which faithfully adapted parts of the manga, was unflinchingly brutal.
So 4Kids had to figure out a workaround. They couldn't just cut the scenes because the entire plot revolved around these high-stakes life-or-death games.
If you remove the threat of death, there's no dramatic tension.
Their solution was arguably one of the most famous or infamous localization choices in television history. They invented the Shadow Realm.
The Shadow Realm. Just saying it brings back memories.
It sounds so ominous, but it didn't exist in the original Japanese story.
No. In the Japanese text, characters simply die. They are murdered. They fall off buildings. They are crushed. The localization team stripped out the word death and replaced it with banishment to the Shadow Realm, an alternate dark dimension from which there is supposedly no escape.
The examples of how they applied this censorship are wild to look at side by side. Let's look at Bandit Keith.
A great example.
He's this disgraced former champion card player. He sneaks into a massive tournament run by Maximillion Pegasus, the creator of the card game. Keith loses, gets desperate, and pulls a literal gun on Pegasus.
A physical loaded firearm, which again violates Western broadcast standards.
Right. So in the original manga, Pegasus uses his magical Millennium Eye to inflict a penalty game called Hand and Gun. He uses magic to literally turn Bandit Keith's own hand into a gun, forces him to point it at his own head, and makes him play a lethal game of Russian roulette.
Forced suicide.
Keith pulls the trigger and he dies. It is horrifying. Now compare that to the 4Kids English anime dub. Pegasus presses a hidden button on his desk, a trapdoor opens under Bandit Keith, and he just falls down a chute.
He literally drops into the ocean.
Bloop, into the water. He gets ejected from the island like a bad theme park ride. And then there's Arcana, the magician character. He challenges Yugi to a duel where their ankles are shackled to the floor.
This one is particularly gruesome.
In the original version, there are these massive, spinning, metallic buzzsaws moving along a track toward them. Whoever loses the card game gets their legs violently sawed off.
It's a literal death match. The physical mutilation is the core threat.
In the English dub, they airbrush the buzzsaws to glow purple and blue. They call them dark energy discs. If the disc hits you, it doesn't cut your legs off. It transports your mind to the shadow realm while leaving your body behind.
I want to pause on this because the philosophical implication of this censorship is fascinating.
Let's hear it.
The goal was to make the shrill less terrifying for children, but by changing the finality of death to an eternal banishment to the shadow realm, they inadvertently created a concept that is existentially much more horrifying.
Wait, you think the shadow realm is scarier than getting your legs sawed off?
Conceptually, yes. Think about it. Death is final. It is a biological end. The pain ceases. The shadow realm, however, is presented as a space of infinite, eternal psychological torment.
That's dark.
It's sensory deprivation in a void of dark magic. There is no release. The visual presentation was sanitized. No blood, no firearms, no buzzsaws tearing into flesh. But the metaphysical stakes were magnified.
Because they're awake for it.
Exactly. A character isn't just losing their life, they're being condemned to an eternity of suffering. It shifts the horror from physical gore to existential dread.
I never thought about it that way, but you're right. To protect kids from seeing a cartoon gun, they accidentally introduced them to the concept of eternal damnation. That is quite the trade-off.
The irony of taking all this physical death out of the show to protect the audience is that the main characters themselves are constantly fighting to protect each other's humanity. When you look past the censorship, the core emotional arcs of the heroes are incredibly profound.
Let's shift to the heroes then, because the source text spends a lot of time on their psychological growth. It's easy to write them off as a standard friend group, but they undergo intense evolution. Let's start with the central dynamic. Yugi and Dark Yugi, who we eventually learn is named Atem, the spirit of a 3,000-year-old Egyptian pharaoh.
Their relationship is the emotional anchor of the entire narrative, and it doesn't start as a perfect partnership.
Initially, Yugi is actually terrified. He has blackouts. He realizes that when he is in danger, he loses time, and when he wakes up, the people who are threatening him are either in comas, driven insane, or horribly injured.
He's living with a supernatural enforcer.
He figures out there's another personality living inside his head, and he is scared of it.
It's a classic exploration of Jungian psychology. Atem represents the shadow self. Yugi is deeply compassionate, forgiving, and kind, but he is a pushover. He lacks the capacity for self-defense.
Atem is the opposite.
Conversely, Atem possesses immense confidence, strategic brilliance, and a willingness to punish evil. But Atem is fundamentally ruthless. He lacks mercy.
They are two halves of a functional person.
Precisely. Through their shared experiences, they have to integrate. Yugi learns courage from Atem. He learns how to assert himself, how to lead, and how to stand his ground without relying on the Pharaoh to fight his battles.
And Atem learns from Yugi too.
He learns the value of compassion. He learns that absolute punitive justice isn't always the answer, and that mercy and friendship hold a power that magic doesn't.
That integration is really tested through their relationship with Katsuya Jonouchi.
Yeah.
Or Joey Wheeler for the dub fans. We need to spend some serious time on Jonouchi because his character arc is arguably the most compelling in the franchise.
Jonouchi's transition is remarkable. He begins the story as a physical threat to Yugi.
He is a literal street thug. In the very first chapter, Jonouchi and his buddy Honda bully Yugi. They beat him up. Jonouchi thinks Yugi is pathetic because he won't fight back.
But the catalyst for Jonouchi's redemption is that Ushio incident we talked about earlier.
Right.
Ushio decides to beat up Jonouchi and Honda just to assert his dominance.
And this is where Yugi's foundational empathy changes the trajectory of the story.
It really does.
Yugi physically steps between the massive Ushio and Jonouchi. Yugi takes a brutal beating to protect the guy who was bullying him just hours prior. When Ushio asks why, Yugi says it's because Jonouchi is his friend.
That act of unearned grace completely shatters Jonouchi's worldview. He was raised in an environment where strength was the only currency. Yugi demonstrates a different kind of strength, moral fortitude.
Jonouchi is so moved that he goes out that same night to a public swimming pool. Earlier in the day, just to be cruel, Jonouchi had stolen a piece of Yugi's Millennium puzzle and thrown it into the water.
A petty act of bullying.
He dives into the dark pool, retrieves the final piece, and quietly returns it to Yugi's grandfather. That unspoken apology is the moment their lifelong friendship is forged.
Jonouchi's arc represents the redemption aspect of the series' moral philosophy. If the villains represent irredeemable corruption that must be purged by the Shadow Games, Jonouchi is the proof that people can change.
He channels his aggressive energy and his background as a brawler into the disciplined framework of the card games.
And his motivations are so incredibly pure. When the series shifts into the Duelist Kingdom arc, this massive, dangerous tournament on a private island, Jonouchi isn't there for glory. He isn't there because he loves card games.
He's there as a working-class kid trying to navigate a medical crisis.
Exactly.
He enters this death tournament entirely to win the prize money, to pay for an operation for his younger sister Shizuka, or Serenity in the dub. She is suffering from a degenerative eye condition and is slowly going blind.
A very real, very human stake.
The operation is her only chance, and their parents are separated and unable to pay for it. Jonouchi is literally fighting professional assassins and ancient magic users to save his sister's eyesight.
It grounds the fantastical elements in a very harsh, relatable reality. The ticking clock of his sister's impending blindness adds an emotional weight to every game he plays.
He isn't a chosen one.
No. He doesn't have an ancient Egyptian spirit guiding his moves. He is a kid with a deck full of warrior cards swinging wildly out of his weight class out of sheer, desperate love for his sibling.
That grounding element is present in the rest of the friend group, too. You've got Anzu, or Téa Gardner. She is athletic, supportive, but she has this massive secret in the early manga. She is working an illegal after-school job at a fast food joint called Burger World.
Illegal in the context of strict Japanese high school regulations, which often forbid students from holding part-time jobs.
Right, she's risking expulsion. Why? Because her ultimate dream is to move to the United States to study to become a professional dancer. She needs the money.
She's fiercely independent.
Yugi and Jonouchi accidentally discover her working there, and instead of blackmailing her or exposing her, they cover for her. They support her ambition.
It highlights the intense societal pressures on Japanese teenagers. Anzu is fighting against a rigid educational system to pursue an artistic passion.
And then there's Honda, or Tristan Taylor. He starts as Jonouchi's lackey, but becomes the fiercely loyal muscle of the group. The manga gives him these hilarious, mundane teenage subplots.
Like the jigsaw puzzle.
Yes. He has a massive crush on Miho Nosaka, the school librarian. He tries to pass her a love letter, but because he's socially awkward, he cuts the letter up into a 50-piece jigsaw puzzle.
A rather on-the-nose thematic choice, considering Yugi's obsession with puzzles.
Exactly. And Miss Chono, that evil teacher whose face falls off, actually confiscates the puzzle and tries to put it together in front of the class to humiliate him. That's what triggers Dark Yugi to step in.
It connects back perfectly.
These slice-of-life, grounded moments, Burger World, jigsaw puzzle love letters, medical bills, they are crucial. They make the insane cosmic stakes later in the story feel so much heavier. Because these are just regular teenagers dealing with high school problems who suddenly get thrust into a supernatural war.
The contrast is deliberate. You need the mundane reality of Burger World to anchor the audience before you introduce a character who embodies modern, ruthless, real-world power clashing with that ancient magic.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You're talking about Kaiba.
I'm talking about Seto Kaiba.
Seto Kaiba is the ultimate rival. He is an icon. He is the teenage CEO of the multinational Kaiba Corporation.
A titan of industry at high school age.
He flies around in jets shaped like his favorite trading card, the Blue Eyes White Dragon. He wears long white trench coats with an absurd amount of belts. He is arrogant, condescending, and brilliant.
But if we look closely at Takahashi's notes and the manga's backstory, Kaiba is not just a spoiled rich kid. He is a survivor of immense systemic psychological abuse.
Let's dive into that trauma. Kaiba and his younger brother, Mukuba, were orphans. They were living in a state-run orphanage. One day, the facility is visited by Gozaburo Kaiba.
Gozaburo is a terrifying figure.
He is a billionaire oligarch, the head of Kaiba Corporation, which at the time was not a gaming company. It was a brutal, global arms manufacturing conglomerate. They made weapons of mass destruction.
Gozaburo was also a world-class chess champion. Seto, who was incredibly intelligent even as a young child, recognized that Gozaburo's visit was his only window of opportunity.
He needed to secure a future for Mokuba so they wouldn't be separated.
So this orphan child walks up to a billionaire weapons manufacturer and challenges him to a game of chess.
The stakes were simple. If Seto won, Gozaburo had to adopt both of them. Seto actually wins the match, but the text reveals he wins by cheating. He studies Gozaburo's methods and manipulates the board.
Gozaburo adopts them, true to his word. But it is a poison chalice. Gozaburo doesn't want a son. He wants an heir to his military empire.
And he subjects Seto to a grueling, torturous regimen of study. He isolates him.
He uses Mokuba as leverage, constantly threatening to throw Mokuba back into the orphanage if Seto doesn't comply. He braced Seto's spirit down to rebuild him in his own sociopathic image.
Gozaburo's ultimate test for Seto is where this goes from tragic to corporate warfare. Gozaburo gives Seto a 2% share of Kaiba Corporation's stock. He challenges the teenager to pay back 10 times the value of that stock within a single year.
It was meant to be an impossible lesson in financial management and subservience.
It spectacularly backfires. Seto doesn't just manage the stock. He uses that 2% to leverage secret meetings with the board of directors. He manipulates the shareholders, orchestrates a massive hostile takeover, and gains majority control of the entire multinational corporation in a single day.
A corporate coup.
He overthrows his abusive father.
And the climax of this boardroom coup is devastating. In the original manga, Gozaburo realizes he has been completely outmaneuvered by the monster he created. He steps up to the window of his high-rise office and commits suicide by defenestration.
He throws himself out the window.
Right. In the anime, they soften it to him having a heart attack, or in the filler arcs, uploading his consciousness into a supercomputer. But the psychological starring on Kaiba remains identical.
He is forged in an environment where empathy is a weakness and domination is the only path to survival.
Think about what Kazuki Takahashi is saying here about modern capitalism and corporate structures. Kaiba's relentless hostility isn't just business. It's a trauma response.
He views every interaction, even a children's card game, as a life-or-death struggle for control, because that is how he was raised.
That perfectly explains his introduction to the series.
When we first meet Kaiba, he discovers that Yugi's grandfather, Sugoroku, owns a wildly rare card, the Blue Eyes White Dragon. There are only 4 in the world. Kaiba demands to buy it.
Sugoroku refuses, saying the card holds sentimental value.
Kaiba can't process that. He kidnaps the old man, forces him into a duel, defeats him, and literally tears the rare card in half just so it can never be used against him. The shock sends the grandfather to the hospital.
Kaiba is a sociopath, applying the cutthroat principles of an arms dealer to a piece of cardboard.
Dark Yugi steps in, defeats Kaiba, and hits him with a penalty game called the Experience of Death. It traps Kaiba in an illusion where he repeatedly experiences being destroyed by monsters.
But instead of learning humility, Kaiba becomes obsessed with revenge.
And that leads to the Death Tea arc.
Death Tea is the ultimate manifestation of Kaiba's corrupted psyche.
Death Tea literally stands for the theme park of death. Kaiba uses his massive corporate wealth to build an actual physical amusement park filled with lethal traps specifically designed to murder Yugi and his friends. This isn't a tournament, this is a Saw movie.
He weaponizes the concept of a game to inflict the same terror and helplessness that he experienced under Gozaburo.
The details in the source text are unhinged. To populate this park, Kaiba hires a literal serial killer named Chopman. Chopman was a man who had murdered 10 Boy Scouts at a camp near Domino Lake.
It's horrific.
Kaiba breaks him out and sets him loose in a puzzle room to chop Yugi to pieces. He also hires the laser tag assassins.
These aren't teenagers with laser pointers.
No, they are professional mercenaries equipped with lethal shock weapons. One of them is Johnny Gale, a former Green Beret guerrilla warfare expert. Another is Bob McGuire, a former SWAT team sniper.
Military contractors.
Kaiba is sending military black ops teams to hunt down high schoolers in a laser tag arena.
Which brings us to the resolution of Death Tea. Dark Yugi finally makes it to the top of the tower and defeats Kaiba in a duel. But Dark Yugi recognizes that Kaiba is fundamentally broken. Physical punishment or an illusion won't fix him.
So he inflicts a penalty game called the Mind Crush. The Mind Crush sounds like a professional wrestling finishing move, but it's incredibly profound.
It's a psychological reset.
Dark Yugi reaches into Kaiba's mind and literally shatters his heart into pieces. He purges the evil, malicious programming instilled by Gozaburo. The process leaves Kaiba in a catatonic coma for nearly a year.
It's violent magical therapy. Kaiba has to painstakingly put the pieces of his own psyche back together, rebuilding his identity from scratch without the abusive influence of his father.
When he wakes up, he shifts Kaiba Corporation away from military weapons manufacturing and turns it entirely into a gaming technology company. He is still arrogant, he is still ruthlessly competitive, but the homicidal evil has been burned away.
It's an incredible redemption arc, but a very non-traditional one. And Kaiba isn't the only antagonist shaped by severe trauma. As we comb through the encyclopedia, it becomes obvious that Takahashi relies on a very specific pattern.
Monsters are not born, they are made by tragedy.
Maximillion Pegasus is perhaps the clearest example of this outside of Kaiba.
Pegasus, or Pegasus J. Crawford in the original text, is the creator of the Duel Monsters card game. He's this eccentric American billionaire. He wears immaculate suits, drinks expensive wine, and runs a company called Industrial Illusions. But he didn't create this global phenomenon to get rich.
His motivation is rooted entirely in catastrophic grief.
The text reveals that Pegasus had a lover, a woman named Cecilia, or Cyndia, in the Japanese release. They met when they were young and they were deeply in love. But shortly after her 17th birthday, or right after they were married depending on the translation, she dies of an illness. Pegasus is absolutely shattered.
He cannot process the finality of her death.
He travels the world searching for myths, legends, anything that speaks of the afterlife. This desperate search leads him to the Valley of the Kings in Egypt.
In Egypt, he encounters the ancient tomb keepers. He is forcibly given the Millennium Eye, which replaces his physical left eye. The eye grants him the ability to read minds and steal souls, but more importantly, it shows him a vision of the ancient Egyptian shadow games.
He sees the ancient stone tablets holding monsters.
Pegasus realizes that this ancient magic deals with souls. He creates the modern card game of Duel Monsters, painting the monsters he saw on cardboard and selling them globally, not as a business venture, but as a massive, complex resurrection ritual.
He needs to gather all the Millennium Items and the proprietary holographic technology of Kaiba Corporation to create a matrix powerful enough to bring Cecilia back to life.
That is why he kidnaps Yugi's grandfather's soul.
That is why he strips the Kaiba brothers of their autonomy. He isn't a cackling villain who wants to conquer the world. He is a grieving widower trying to hack the afterlife to see his wife one more time.
But the tragedy is that the Millennium Items do not heal human pain. They amplify it.
The Millennium Eye isolates Pegasus.
He lives in a massive castle on a private island, surrounded by cartoon characters he loves, completely alone with his tragedy. He justifies monstrous actions against children because his own grief has blinded him to the humanity of others.
If we're talking about trauma amplifying into destructive magic, we have to look at Marik Ishtar. Marik is the main antagonist of the Battle City arc, and his backstory is, without a doubt, the most grueling in the entire franchise.
Marik's story explores the concept of generational trauma taken to its literal physical extreme.
Marik is born into a clan of tomb keepers in Egypt. Their entire generational purpose, passed down for 3,000 years, is to guard the forgotten tomb of the Pharaoh in secret.
A life of total isolation.
This means they live in absolute isolation underground. They aren't allowed to see the outside world. They aren't allowed to ride motorcycles or listen to music.
It is an oppressive, cult-like existence enforced by his abusive father. But the true horror is the initiation ritual.
To become the true heir of the tomb keepers, Marik is forced, as a child, to undergo a mutilation ritual. The source text specifies that his father uses a searing hot dagger to carve the ancient secrets of the Pharaoh directly into Marik's back.
A physical branding.
His physical body is branded with deep, agonizing scars.
This is where the series brilliantly utilizes magical realism to represent severe psychological phenomena. The sheer physical agony of that branding, combined with the emotional despair of knowing his entire life is a prison, fractures Marik's mind.
It's a textbook representation of dissociative identity disorder, or DCD, birthed by extreme childhood abuse.
To protect his core self from the unbearable pain, his psyche splits. This entirely separate identity is formed. Dark Marik.
Dark Marik is everything the regular Marik is not. He is purely sadistic. He thrives on chaos and the suffering of others. He feels no pain. He is the raw, unfiltered manifestation of a child's rage turned outward against the world.
And we must discuss Rashid, or Odeon, and his role in this dynamic.
Rashid breaks my heart. He is Marik's adoptive older brother. The father treated Rashid like a servant, beating him, but Rashid loved Marik fiercely. When Rashid saw the dark personality emerging in Marik after the ritual, Rashid did something unthinkable.
A massive sacrifice.
He took a dagger and carved symbols into his own face.
He mutilated himself to share his brother's physical and emotional pain.
Right, it creates a psychological tether. Rashid's loyalty and presence act as a literal lock on the cage of Marik's dark side. As long as Rashid is nearby, Dark Marik cannot take control.
But that tether is fragile. During the Battle City tournament, Rashid is ordered to use a counterfeit Egyptian god card. He isn't worthy of its power, and the resulting magical backlash strikes him down with lightning.
He is incapacitated.
The lock breaks.
Dark Marik emerges completely. And the very first thing this dark personality did, years prior when it first briefly emerged, he murdered their abusive father. He skinned the father's back and threw him to the shadows.
In the English dub, of course, they say he sent him to the Shadow Realm, but the implication is identical. The trauma comes full circle.
Marik forms a global gang of card thieves called the Ghouls, mind-controlling people with his Millennium Rod.
The overarching pattern here is undeniable. The magic in Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not exist in a vacuum. It is deeply drawn to the cracks in a person's soul. The Millennium Items are magnets for trauma.
Which brings us to the origin of the items themselves, the Millennium World arc. If you thought modern-day corporate coups and hot deco brandings were intense, the ancient history of this universe is drenched in blood.
The creation of the Millennium Items is the original sin of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Universe.
We travel back 3,000 years to ancient Egypt. The kingdom is under threat from invading armies. The pharaoh's brother, priest Akhenaten, secretly harbors deep jealousy and a desire for absolute power. He discovers a ritual in a dark tome called Shadow Alchemy. He convinces the court that they need powerful magical items to defend the kingdom.
But he doesn't tell them the cost of the ritual.
He takes a squadron of soldiers to a place called Kul Elna. Kul Elna is a haven for thieves, outcasts, and the impoverished. Akhenaten orders a complete massacre. The soldiers slaughter every single man, woman, and child in the village.
Think of it like the concept of Horcruxes in Harry Potter, where murder splits a soul to create a magical artifact. But this is on an industrial scale.
They didn't just split one soul.
They used the blood, the flesh, and the agonized souls of an entire slaughtered zip code, melting them down along with gold in a massive cauldron to forge the 7 Millennium Items.
They're weapons of mass destruction powered by genocide. And there was one survivor of the Kul Elna massacre, a young child who hid and watched the royal soldiers melt his family and friends down into golden trinkets. That child grew up to be the thief king Bakura.
Can you really blame Bakura for being the villain?
Honestly, no.
From his perspective, the royal court are the monsters. They butchered his people to make shiny jewelry for the priests. He dedicates his entire existence to revenge.
He eventually merges his soul with a fragment of the dark god, Zorc Necrophades. Zorc is this massive apocalyptic entity born from the collective darkness of humanity. Bakura becomes Dark Bakura, the overarching villain of the entire franchise, and thousands of years later, his vengeful spirit is trapped in the Millennium Ring.
Which then falls into the hands of a modern teenager, Ryo Bakura.
Poor Ryo. He is just a sweet, polite transfer student who likes playing tabletop RPGs like Monster World. He gets completely hijacked by this ancient mass-murdering spirit. Dark Bakura uses Ryo's body to trap Yugi and his friends' souls inside miniature Dungeons and Dragons figures.
The irony is profound. The ancient Egyptian court justified a horrific atrocity in the name of peace, and in doing so, they literally forged the instrument of their own destruction. Dark Bakura is the living embodiment of the kingdom's karmic debt.
And this ancient world is where we finally learn the canonical origin of the trading cards. They didn't play a children's card game in ancient Egypt. They engaged in literal physical combat using a concept called Ka.
The concept of Ka is central to understanding the mythology. In the ancient world, the priests used the newly forged Millennium Items to peer into the souls of criminals and sinners. If they found a powerful, monstrous manifestation of that person's sins or malice, their Ka, they would magically rip that monster out of the person's soul.
They would extract the soul monster and seal it into a massive, heavy stone tablet. They basically imprisoned these manifestations of human sin. And then when war broke out, the priests would summon these monsters out of the stone tablets to fight on the battlefield.
This is the in-universe origin of Duel Monsters.
Yes. Maximillion Pegasus goes to Egypt 3,000 years later, sees these ruins filled with stone slabs depicting horrifying monsters, and essentially thinks, I'm going to paint these put them on cardboard, and sell booster packs to kids. The trading cards are literal paper representations of ancient human sins and sealed soul monsters.
This raises an important question about the nature of destiny and free will within the narrative. The modern characters, Yugi, Kaiba, Jonouchi, are not just randomly assigned their favorite cards. Their decks are subconsciously dictated by the actions of their past lives.
The most tragic and beautiful example of this is the origin of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. We know modern Seto Kaiba is obsessed with this card. He bases his entire corporate aesthetic around it. But in ancient Egypt, Kaiba's past life, priest Seto, encountered a young, pale, foreign woman named Kisara.
Kisara's story is an exploration of classism and prejudice. Because of her unusual pale appearance and white hair, she is ostracized, hunted, and stoned by the villagers.
Priest Seto rescues her from the mob, just as he had rescued her from slave traders when they were children. He takes her in. But the other priests sense something within her. Kisara houses a spirit of unimaginable power within her soul, the spirit of the Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Shada, the wielder of the Millennium Key, measures her power and realizes the monster within this fragile, outcast woman rivals the power of the Egyptian gods themselves.
Priest Akhenaten, the guy who caused the massacre, who also happens to secretly be Priest Seto's biological father, wants to extract the dragon from Kisara. He wants to give Seto the power to overthrow the Pharaoh. But doing so would kill Kisara.
Priest Seto refuses. He chooses to protect her over gaining ultimate power.
But the tragedy strikes. Akhenaten attacks, and Kisara sacrifices her own life to jump in front of an attack meant for Priest Seto. She dies in his arms. Her soul permanently becomes the Blue Eyes White Dragon, choosing to linger in the physical world as a guardian spirit fueled by love and sacrifice to protect Seto.
Kazuki Takahashi explicitly noted that he intended to explore this romantic relationship more fully, but was constrained by serialization deadlines. However, the thematic resonance is crystal clear. Kaiba's modern-day aggressive obsession with the Blue Eyes White Dragon isn't just about having a card with 3,000 attack points.
It's the subconscious 3,000-year-old echo of a tragic romance.
Exactly. His soul remembers the woman who died for him. She was the pure light that contrasted his own darkness. Modern Kaiba, traumatized and isolated by his adoptive father, is desperately clinging to the only source of unconditional love his past life ever knew.
His conscious mind just thinks it's a rare piece of cardboard.
The lore elevates a simple corporate gaming rivalry into a cosmic tragedy spanning millennia.
It is basically a Shakespearean tragedy wrapped in a holographic trading card game.
Yeah.
But listen, as heavy, dark, and psychologically grueling as all of this ancient lore and trauma is, we cannot do a deep dive on Yu-Gi-Oh! Without acknowledging the elephant in the room. This franchise is also, occasionally, completely absurd.
The tonal whiplash is definitely a signature of the series.
I want to spend some real time on what I call the bizarre detours. Because mixed in with the ancient blood magic and the corporate defenestration, you have plot lines that are just inherently hilarious. Let's talk about Mr. Clown.
Ah, the Black Clown.
Yes, Mr. Clown owns a rival game shop called the Black Clown. He holds a grudge against Yugi's grandpa. He challenges the grandpa to a shadow game called the Devil's Board Game over ownership of the Millennium Puzzle. Mr. Clown loses. Dark Yugi hits him with a penalty game. Does he go insane? Does he catch on fire? No. He instantly ages 50 years in a single night. He literally just wakes up as an incredibly old man.
It's a fairy tale punishment inserted into a high-stakes thriller.
And then we have the player killers, hired by Pegasus on Duelist Kingdom. You have this massive island tournament meant to determine the future CEO of Kaiba Corporation. And Pegasus employs a man literally called the ventriloquist of the dead. This guy uses a creepy life-size puppet, modeled after Seto Kaiba, to duel for him.
It's an incredibly literal, almost campy externalization of the internal conflicts the characters are facing.
When the ventriloquist loses, Dark Yugi gives him the puppet illusion penalty game, making him hallucinate that his own puppet is attacking him. But wait, it gets weirder. There is another player killer who is an obese shapeshifter. He disguises himself as Kaiba and runs around the island claiming to be the physical manifestation of the evil half of Kaiba's soul that Yugi purged during the Mind Crush.
A physical manifestation of a discarded psychological state, wandering around an island playing a card game.
But nothing, and I mean nothing, tops the sheer corporate absurdity of the Big Five. The Big Five are the top executives of Kaiba Corporation's board of directors. These are the guys who helped Seto overthrow Gozaburo, but then they get greedy and try to overthrow Seto by making a deal with Pegasus.
They are the ultimate embodiment of faceless bureaucratic corporate greed.
And what is their punishment? In a heavily detailed anime filler arc, these middle-aged wealthy businessmen get their minds trapped in a virtual reality game developed by Kaiba, but they don't appear as themselves in cyberspace. They're forced to take the forms of random duel monsters.
The visual of this is staggering if you think about the corporate structure of a Japanese keiretsu.
You have a former chief financial officer running around a digital forest as a giant nightmare penguin. The former chief legal officer is prosecuting people while dressed as the judge man. They are desperately trying to defeat Yugi and his friends in this VR space so they can steal the teenagers' physical bodies, escape the computer, and go back to doing hostile corporate takeovers in the real world.
A hostile takeover of a teenager's body by a cybernetic penguin.
It is. The Matrix meets a petting zoo. It is so funny. And then we have Duke Devlin, or Ryuji Otogi in the Japanese version. Duke is a game designer. He idolizes Pegasus. He thinks Yugi cheated to beat Pegasus, ruining his idol's life. Does Duke hire assassins? Does he steal a Millennium Item?
No, he takes a much more petty route.
He designs an entirely new, mathematically complex tabletop game called Dungeon Dice Monsters. He creates a brand new IP, forces Yugi to play it without knowing the rules, entirely out of spite. It's a masterclass in petty revenge.
I know we're laughing at the absurdity of the Nightmare Penguin in the dice games, but I'd actually push back on writing them off entirely as just filler. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these bizarre arcs underscore the foundational rule of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Universe.
What rule is that?
That the game is the great equalizer. Even in its most absurd moments, the series maintains a rigid, almost dogmatic commitment to its central theme. All conflicts, no matter how personal, corporate, or apocalyptic, must be resolved through a hyper-specific set of rules.
That makes sense. Whether you are fighting to save the world from an ancient Egyptian dark god, or fighting an accountant who is turned into a penguin, the methodology is exactly the same.
The game enforces order on a chaotic universe. It removes physical strength from the equation. Ushio's muscles don't matter. Gozaburo's billions don't matter. The game forces the participants to rely entirely on their intellect, their strategy, and ultimately the truth of their own moral character. You cannot hide who you are when you're forced to play.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive looking at a franchise most people remember as a vehicle to sell booster packs of shiny cards to kids on the playground. But what we've unpacked from this encyclopedia is a story with incredible hidden depths.
It began as a horrifying manga about karmic penalty games, exploring the sociology of bullying and retribution.
It evolved into a globally censored anime that accidentally made its afterlife concept even more terrifying by inventing the sensory deprivation and eternal torment of the Shadow Realm.
It gave us villains forged not by inherent evil, but by unthinkable childhood abuse and systemic trauma. From Gozaburo Kaiba's chessboard manipulations to the literal hot dagger branding of the Tomb Keepers, it insists that monsters are created by the cruelty of others.
And it tied it all together with a sprawling, millennia-spanning mythology about blood magic, reincarnation, and the physical manifestation of human sin trapped in stone tablets. It is vastly, vastly more complex than just a marketing tool.
The longevity of the franchise speaks to that psychological depth. The games we play are rarely just games, they're frameworks for interaction. I would encourage you, the listener, to reflect on your own competitive nature.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Think about the games you play in your own life, whether it's a casual tabletop RPG with friends, a fiercely competitive video game, or even the unwritten games of office politics and corporate maneuvering. How do you behave within those rules? Do you seek to dominate and crush your opponent like Kaiba? Do you collaborate and protect your team like Yugi? Do you look for loopholes to exploit? In the philosophy of Kazuki Takahashi's universe, the way you play the game is the ultimate, unfiltered reflection of your true inner character. The stakes might not be your eternal soul, but the game always reveals who you really are.
I love that. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. We spent a lot of time talking about the ancient Egyptian concept of Kade. The idea that the monsters sealed in those stone slabs, the monsters printed on those modern trading cards, are actually the physical manifestations of the darkness, the light, the grief, and the hopes living inside human souls. The blue-eyes white dragon was born of a woman's tragic, self-sacrificing love. The dark gods were born of vengeance and massacres.
It's a mirror held up to the human spirit.
Exactly. So if that concept is true, if the things we are drawn to summon into the world are reflections of our deepest selves, what would your deck reveal about you? If the Millennium Items were real and you were forced to sit across the table in a true shadow game today, looking at the monsters you've chosen to represent you, would you be the hero of the story or would you be the villain steering down the barrel of a penalty game? Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Keep questioning the stories you think you know, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.